guys, Keith Keller, Melbourne, Australia. And this is another fantastic episode of Wisdom Wednesdays. It's Wisdom Wednesdays in everywhere else except where we are. You know, I'm in Melbourne, Australia, and it's 11 a.m. My friend Michelle Tanmisi is calling in from Singapore, where it's 8 a.m. on a Thursday. We're both in the future here. But this show is mainly based on our US audience, which is based mainly around the eastern states, where it is 7 p.m. Eastern. And many of you I know are celebrating Thanksgiving, so you may not be watching this show live. But if you do, please make some comments. What we're doing here with this show is we're now going live on LinkedIn. We're going live on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, and I'm hoping one day to get LinkedIn. It's another little goal I have. And so please let me know, first of all, where you're calling from or where you're watching from, and second of all, what platform you're watching on, because I want to feed those comments into the group. And I want people to know that they can watch in up to 3 places. And this particular site called StreamYard is a new idea that we're trying to get the word out about your books. And Michelle, calling in from Singapore, has 2 books, one of which is an Amazon bestseller. And she's never been on StreamYard before, and she was really taken aback by how much better it is than the Zoom experience, weren't you?
Yes. This is so different. It's actually, I feel like I'm on CNN.
Yeah, and it really does create a lovely environment. And as you know, in the group, especially for people following in the Facebook group, that my job in the group is to teach you some of the marketing hacks that I'm experimenting with. And Zoom is fine, and everyone's heard of Zoom, but we're all getting Zoom fatigue. And so I'm trying to find some ways to make it fast and funky. And I tell you what, I found some really cool images of Michelle's book. Have a look at this. This is her real book. And so I just did a bit of a graphic here. And so it's what we call a pattern interrupt. Instead of watching our faces all the time, you can have a look at this image. It's a bit of a trick that I'm trying to sort of build engagement into our live streams. And a variation on the process is the graphic for the book superimposed into a Kindle. Do you have a Kindle as well, or do you mainly have the real book?
There is a Kindle as well. There's a Kindle. So there's a paperback and a Kindle version.
Yeah, and let me just explain what's happening here. Michelle is a science fiction writer of loosely dystopian fiction, a book based in the future where maybe humans haven't been so clever, and we've sort of, we've dirtied our backyard, and we're not living in our perfect environment, and that's not an unrealistic scenario, which is why these books are so powerful, because they sort of, in a way, foretell what could happen if we don't be a little bit more clever. So can you first tell us a little bit about your writing journey and what books you write, and then talk about the context of today's show, which is how to edit as a new writer.
Okay. So I began writing many years ago when I was a child, actually. But the very first book that I collaborated was actually this one. It's called, I don't know, there you go, the lighting is better now. Adventures in Manifesting It's Conscious Business.
Yeah.
So when I did that, I realized that I really enjoyed being part of a book family. And so years after, I began writing my own novel, which is the dystopian speculative fiction, science fiction novel. And that one that was an interesting journey. I started writing in 2015. I didn't think about it. I put it aside. It got locked in a cupboard for a while. And then about 2017, I decided, it's not such a bad idea to do it. And then 2018 was when I really took it up again, and it became a novel, and it was published in 2019. So I think I might have the same journey as a lot of writers, where there's a lot of doubt in the beginning, where you think about writing, but you're not sure, and you don't think you're good enough. And eventually what happens is that it gets locked up in a cupboard somewhere.
And you never get round to it. You never do it.
No, because, you lose the courage. You think that, oh my goodness, there are so many other better books out there. Who am I to think that I can be a writer? But all I can say is that if you take the courage to take that thing out of your cupboard and really finish it, it's very rewarding. It's really quite.
Oh, that's very inspiring.
It's nice to hold your own book in your hands.
Yeah, and you've got two of them.
Yeah, gosh, yeah. Well, this is a collaboration, but I would say this one, yes.
Yeah,
this is mine.
And it's an Amazon bestseller. That's the
yes,
cooler thing.
Is, yeah.
So look, this is what this show's about. It's about people that are doing the work. They're getting the results. You've got a physical book you can hold in your hand. Now that's a goal of yours, I'm guessing, from a long time ago, and you've done it.
Yes, from when I was a little tiny bit.
But I want to shout out to who's watching. Katian, my friend from Trinidad. This is a really cool idea.
Hi,
Melbourne,
Katian.
Singapore, Trinidad. She's calling in from. She's watching in from Facebook in the Facebook group. So
hi,
a big hello to Katian. She's got a wonderful. She's lovely. She's got a lovely podcast there.
That could be a name for a protagonist.
Okay. Well, you never know. The next book might come out with Katian in it, and she'll know where it came from. So she's in Trinidad, and we really are a global family. Trinidad, Singapore, Melbourne, and Linda is watching on YouTube, but she says Singapore. I'm just wondering whether that means she's in Singapore or she loves Singapore.
Well, if you're in Singapore, visiting. Linda, let's meet. Coffee.
And you can do a little bit of a selfie.
Yes.
So, and this is actually one of the really interesting things about internet marketing, or the process that writers love writing, but they don't really love promoting themselves. But here we are chatting to you about your book, and Katian's in Trinidad, and Linda, I'll get some clarification on whether she's actually in Singapore or whether she just loves the idea that you're calling in from there. But just say Linda was there.
Okay.
And here's the person that I know who's based in Connecticut, but happens to be traveling and happens to be in Singapore, if that's the case. And then you meet up, and this random guy on the other end of the planet introduces two people that have never met before. And you could meet in a park and pass each other by, couldn't you? Because there's no context.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now you could meet at the is it the Merlin, the big white fountain thing?
Oh, the Malayan, yeah. Malayan.
Yeah, the Malayan.
Yes.
Meet at the Malayan and have a coffee, and then you know that this guy in Melbourne, Australia, stitched that up. And this is what we're doing with this group. It's not you and your mates hanging around in the town you live. It's trying to build the global community. So Katian said, yes, please put me in the book. So that's
I'm
very,
going to
very
hold
good.
that.
Yeah. Okay, there it is. No. I'm in Connecticut, but I wish I was in Singapore. So this is exactly what I'm talking about with StreamYard and Zoom fatigue. Zoom is this lovely site which looks a little bit like this, just two people side by side, lots of black space, and a little bit boring.
Yeah.
Whereas with StreamYard, you can have 2 people up to 10 people. You can have all these great graphics. You can have a banner down the bottom. You can have a little, I'll show you this little trick that I've got here for you. You can have your book as a little thumbnail up the top there.
Oh, yes.
Up the top.
Right there.
And what that does, and I'm really trying to pioneer this, what this does is it allows us to have engaging content. We're not just sharing our stuff. We're not just, people aren't buying the product. They're sort of buying into the journey. This is not exactly what this show's about today, but the point is we've got a very good example here. Connecticut, Trinidad, Melbourne, Singapore, all on the call simultaneously in their houses or on their laptops or at the beach, drinking coconuts, or maybe in Katian's case, she might be drinking rum down at the local bar. I don't know what time it is there. But so at the moment, we've got people watching on YouTube and also on Facebook. We can also have people calling in from Periscope and or Twitter. So this is really what we're trying to do here with the group. And that's a great introduction to get the juice going. But really what today's show is about, especially for new time authors, is, well, how do you get started? Why is it important to do the editing yourself initially? And how did you do it, and how do you recommend people get started?
Okay. Well, first of all, I can tell you as an author myself, one of the most important things about writing a book is to make sure that when people are reading the book, they don't go, oh, good heavens, that's a mistake here. Oh, good heavens, there's a comma here. Oh, good heavens, there is a... Because what happens is that it distracts from the general story. Yeah, and so editing, that's what makes editing so important. You need to get your book kind of read worthy. I don't know if that's a word, but I've just made that one up.
Yeah.
So it has to be perfectly read worthy so that people can kind of flow into the book and forget the world they're living in and immerse themselves into your world. And in order to do that, you must make sure the book is perfectly edited. Because editing is not just about grammar. It's not just about sentences. It's not just about style. It's also about plot. It's also about plugging all the holes in the plot that you have. And that could happen. You might mention, for instance, you might use the name David for a guy in the beginning of the book, and suddenly you forgot and you call him Michael at the end. People are going to go, who the heck is Michael? Where did he come from? I thought it was David, but then you've forgotten because you've written the book and it's hundreds of pages later, and you've basically, And
have you found yourself in the self-editing phase? Let's take that initial stage.
Okay.
Have you found yourself when you look at it, because it is a different phase, a different mindset, when you find yourself editing, are you seeing glaringly obvious things you didn't see initially?
Yes. See, I see editing is writing a book is a little bit like making bread. For those who are bakers among you, I love baking. But it's like bread, right? So when you have all the ingredients, you put it all together. So that's your book. You're putting it all together, and then you're kneading it. You're putting the right amounts. You make sure everything is good, and you're kneading it. So that's kind of the process of writing. And then the process of editing doesn't start until you rest the bread. So you put it aside for it to grow, for it to kind of it grows, right? It grows with all the ingredients you put in. And then you go back again, and then you knead it a second time. So that's the second time. That is
editing is like kneading, isn't it?
Kind of, yeah. Because the first part is creating, and then once it's done, you need to let it kind of sit so it grows a little bit. And then when you come back again, you knead it the second time. And this is when you edit. Because what happens is that when you edit straight away, as you finish the book, you're not going to see the mistakes because you've written it. You've just written it. You're going to skip over
it's fresh in your mind.
It's fresh in your mind. You've probably read it, so many times that you skip over all the mistakes. But when you let it rest and you come back again, you are literally reading it as a reader, no longer as a writer. And that's when the glaring mistakes are going to pop out and tell you, oh, this is wrong, that's wrong. You forgot a word here, you forgot a comma there. You use different names in two contexts, in the same context, and that's when things are going to come up. So that's when the real editing works. And
the thing that I'm really interested in, I want to throw to the group here, a group on Facebook, a group on Twitter, a group on LinkedIn, a group on YouTube. And please make any comments you want to make so that we can feed these in for Michelle.
Yes.
But I think the really interesting challenge that we have, because most people would agree that you need to edit, I think the biggest challenge is, when do you give that over? When do you bring in someone else and say, I think I've done as much as I can? At what stage do you get, and how do you choose a professional editor? You've got some criteria for that, haven't you?
Yeah, I do. Well, first of all, when I'm writing, I'm actually editing at the same time. So when you write a book, or when I write a book, let's put it in my context, because everybody does it differently. But when I write a book, I tend to write sometimes the chapters a few times, because I would write, and then let's say I sleep on it, the next day I wake up and I would read again and go, oh, no, that's not very good. So actually I'm in the process of editing my own chapters. And that would take a long time before, when, let's say the book is now completed and I've already finished editing, I've finished progressive editing, I would let it sit, and then I would come back again and read the whole book as it is. And then that's when I do my second editing and maybe even my third editing. And when I'm done with that, let's say that I have a question there. Let's say that I'm done with that and everything is as much as I can do. I can't see anything wrong anymore. That's when I go to a professional editor.
Let me pick up what you've just said there. This is brilliant. I've never heard this phrase before, but I get what you're saying straight away. You're talking about two concepts there. You're talking about progressive editing as you go, just for a general flow and general vibe. And then you rest the book like bread. You rest the book and you come back to it fresh, like in the kneading process. I know this because my wife loved making bread. I know exactly how this feels. And so you rest it and it grows and it sort of sits and it proves.
Yep.
And then you have to come back to it. And that's when you read it through fully.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you might do that once or twice, but then you've done as much as you can yourself.
Yep.
Yeah. And then it's time to put it out to the
Yes.
world and say, okay, well, can I get someone else's opinion? And you might even have several editors, I'm guessing.
Well, I'd love to get several editors, but the reality is that editors, professional ones, they're not cheap. So they're not cheap. So normally I choose the professional editor very carefully, and once I've agreed on one, that I just hand over the manuscript, hand over my baby or my bread, whatever, and and let them take a look, because it's always good to have a second pair of eyes, or a third or a fourth. You can actually even give a manuscript to, let's say for you could give it to your wife for her to read, so that she becomes a beta reader. That could also help.
I'm going to pick up on this idea of a beta reader.
Yeah, that could also help.
Linda's question here.
Yes.
The question is, what's the difference between book editing and blog editing? Do you have a blog, Linda? Do you blog?
I don't know. I have a blog, so I don't know what's her answer to that.
Let me maybe start the process.
Yes.
So when you talked about blog or progressive editing is an idea that you've edited a chapter at a time, but the book itself is much bigger. So you've got progressive editing, and then you've got a bigger book, which is a sort of a general story.
Yeah.
Whereas a blog, a little bit like a chapter, I would imagine a blog is a general progressive edit.
Yes, I have a blog.
I've got this story and I've told it today, and I'll edit it today, and maybe I'll have a look at it tomorrow, and then maybe I'll let it sit. But I won't come back to it necessarily again. I'm interested, Linda, if that's a good answer to that, because with a blog post is like a chapter, but the whole blog as a sort of event is like the whole book, if you like. And people might go down and read progressive chapters of the blog. Does that answer your question, Linda? Do you think that makes a choice? Would that be a reasonable answer to what you're thinking?
If I may say about blogs, like I have a blog, right? Are you reading her answer now?
No, she hasn't come back with it yet.
Okay, so I have a blog, and I think the difference between books and blogs is that a blog is very personal. You're writing to a very specific audience that is only reading your thoughts. So I don't edit as much in blogs. I do read over what I write, and then basically after a while I post it out, because it is my opinion. It's kind of what what I think, and so it's not that it's not important to edit. Of course, it's important to edit. You have to reread and make sure that what you're trying to say out there it's what you would like to convey as a message, right? But I don't send the blog to a professional, for instance. I just do it on my own.
That in itself is interesting, that you don't send your blog posts to a second pair of eyes.
Because it's a very personal thing. Yeah, it's a personal thing. I blog about empathy, about kindness. I don't check with anybody about that, because it's my opinion. It's my world. It's how I see things.
It's very interesting in the context of dystopian fiction, because the book itself is showing a possible future that maybe you wouldn't want to happen. And it's almost like a red light. It's almost like a warning signal. Hey, I think we're going down this path. This is not unreasonable. In 100 years, we could be doing this. Can we agree that that's not what we want?
Well,
and then your blog post.
Yeah. Well, look at this pandemic, though. Who would have thought?
Yeah.
Who would have thought that we would have a pandemic in the 21st century? I mean, who would have thought? I'm sure there'll be a lot of books about pandemics coming up soon, but but who would have thought that this would be the reality? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we had the Spanish flu years and years and years ago, but we never thought it would be at the same situation again in the 21st century, where we had vaccines, where where it's much cleaner, we have flush toilets. Who would have thought?
Yeah. And the thing that's very interesting about your dichotomy there, and I'll use that word, is that your books that you write are fiction books.
Yes.
And your blogs that you write are personal pieces.
Very
I would imagine that's quite a common scenario, but also equally common, maybe the case with Linda, is that she writes about material that's close to her heart, and she blogs about it. So those two things might actually be quite similar. A lot of the people in the group write nonfiction comments about their coaching. For instance, my friend Jane Jackson is a career coach. And so she wrote a book about how to find a job when you get retrenched, or if you hate it, or how to stay buoyant in your 40s when the people around you are sort of jostling around, and 40s and 50s and things like this. So her book was very much an extension of her work. It wasn't a fiction piece which you would read for leisure or for commentary. So I hope that answers Linda's question. And please feel free to comment more, Linda, there. What I really want to pick up on is the idea of beta readers or beta readers. I think this is an extremely interesting idea, that if you've got a book which you've then edited in a progressive way and then in a much longer way, you've then sent it to a person who then put their touch on it at a cost, because they've got to make a living. And then you put the book out. But you don't send it out to the whole world. You just send it out to a group. How do you do the beta readers bit? How does that sort of suit you?
So beta readers need to be, I think, this is my personal opinion, you can't just send it to anybody. I think you need to choose your beta reader as carefully as you do choose your editor. You don't want to choose somebody who's always going to agree with you, for instance, because they would just going to go, oh my goodness, it's a great book, and then they won't tell you what's wrong with it, because they just want to encourage you all the time. You want to send to somebody who will have the courage to tell you this sucks, for instance. And it doesn't matter, right? Or at least in a nicer way, like, I think I didn't quite connect with the protagonist, or I didn't quite connect with the story. Be kindly honest about it, because then you can really you still have time to go back and change things before it goes into publication, right? Or maybe then you can understand why it might not work as a story. So it is important to send it to a beta reader who is going to give you an honest opinion.
And how do you find them? How do you find your beta readers?
I find them through friends, actually, because, for instance, if I know that I have a friend who is an avid reader, who loves to read, and he is the kind of person who will give me an honest opinion as instead of a muted one, then that would be the person I would choose. Okay. I would not give it, for instance, to my family, because only because none of my family members read. You don't want to send it to a non-reader, because they would go, oh gosh, I have to read a book. Oh gosh, I have to, they would feel obliged, and you don't want to send it. Obliged. You don't want to send it to somebody who feels like they have to do it because it's in support of you. Send it to somebody who loves reading, who loves discovering new fiction, who wants to be the first person to read your book. That could be an incentive. So I actually sent it to a friend of mine, and he is an avid reader. He reads everything from nonfiction to fiction. He reads, and we're always sharing ideas. Not ideas, but we share authors. He's like, oh, have you read this book? And so I know he's the perfect person. So I sent it to him, and it was nice because he was very honest. He goes like, and he literally picked up some stuff. He goes, Michelle, you seem to have missed something there. And I went, really? So there already is an editing thing that I didn't. I completely skipped over because I was so much into the thing, I didn't see it. But he picked it up, which is fantastic. So I was like, oh, okay, first. And then as he read through the story, he said, this is actually really good. After a while, I completely got lost, and I wasn't even looking at anything anymore. The story was interesting, and he's giving comments like, oh, I really didn't like this character, and I like the fact that he didn't like the character because if he has a bad feeling about the character, that means that the character was real. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to have a plastic character. You want a character that invokes a certain kind of emotion in a person. And he said, oh, this character is so annoying. I said, I like that. I wanted to make her annoying. So it worked.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So in a way, you got the reaction you wanted.
Yeah, and that in itself is another sort of editing, because now you're you're using another pair of eyes to see your work.
Yeah.
Instead of, before it goes into, or even while a professional editor is looking at it, because a beta reader might be your audience, so you want to make sure that you're hitting the right points.
Okay, I just want to pick up on a comment from Linda. I think what she's saying here is that wouldn't it be nice that we could have imagined a bigger and brighter future without having to go through what we're thinking here. Let me read this out. If anyone would have thought that this might have hit home without an impact is likely rethinking their future. So the idea there is that, I'm guessing I might need clarification on that, but dystopian fiction is really powerful because, especially if it's futuristic, in the sense that it talks about a possible future which we don't want.
Yes.
Yeah. And so there is a big phrase at the moment, the Great Reset, which is this idea that maybe we've gone too far, guys. Maybe we've been a bit too gluttonous and selfish, and maybe we need to calm down. And if we don't, we're just going to have nothing to go with. There's already 8 billion people on the planet. How many more can we add? Yeah. And dystopian fiction is very common at the moment because people are imagining, well, what's 2050 going to be like? When's your book actually set?
Oh, okay. This one I have a few comments about. People go, what? My book is set in the year 4848.
4848. Okay.
I do it on purpose because, well, it's originally I lived in Hong Kong for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
So the number 4 is synonymous. It sounds like death, right? The number 8 sounds like luck. So 4848, I chose it on purpose because it's almost as if with death there is also some. I kind of fuse death with luck together.
Okay.
So
doesn't the word crisis also mean opportunity? Isn't there something in the Chinese symbolism that says that crisis is the same superimposition for opportunity?
Yes, it's kind of that's the idea. Death and luck. So death and opportunity. So even people keep saying, why do you set it so far ahead in the future? And that's because
it's the numbers.
It's the numbers, but also because I wanted to imagine an Earth that has changed. And in that year, in the book that in Late Dawn, the Earth has literally morphed itself. The continents, some continents have shifted, the waters have risen. So I needed enough time to pass so that it might be a reality.
So there was a physicality to it.
Yeah, because if I were to set it in like 2580, I know it's not going to happen yet. But 4848, you don't know, because I set it so far ahead because I wanted to create an Earth where we had time for all the stuff that we've done to this Earth to take effect. So, more volcanoes, huge, bigger hurricanes, the waters have risen, some islands have disappeared, and suddenly the Earth is starting to crack and to move. So it's almost as if like we're going through another phase of when the dinosaurs were here, but now it's a new one.
Wow!
So I did it on purpose for that reason.
And the other book has got a different vibe, I'm guessing.
The other book is not set so far in advance, but it is about a different topic. It's about genetic engineering.
Oh wow! Okay, that's very relevant, isn't it?
It is, and that. I wrote it is still in the process of being actually it's already finished editing. I'm just waiting for a publisher to pick it up. I wrote that book because I've seen what people are starting to do now. People are starting, for instance, that the scientists in China who genetically modified the twins. He did it maybe for the right reasons, but he didn't quite understand yet what the consequences might be. And so that book is about, I kind of created a future China.
Yeah.
when that is going on, that is happening.
For those who haven't heard that story, can you pick up on what you're talking about there? A pair of twins have been genetically modified by a Chinese scientist?
Yeah, because he wanted to take away the HIV component. HIV gene or something, that gene that causes HIV. And I think he's in jail right now, because in the beginning, people were going, whoa, it's amazing. And I think in the end, because there was so much outcry about how could you have done this without really researching the possible effects of taking something out, what would happen to the rest. And now I think he's in jail.
Yeah. And what did actually happen? What was the what were the consequences
We
of
don't
his
know,
initial actions?
because, well, the kids, the children were born. I mean, but we don't know what's going to. We still don't know. We need to see what happens to them when they grow up.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing with genetic engineering, right? We don't know the consequences until the body actually grows, and I don't know if they're going to come up with anything. Will they get anything in their bodies from what has happened before, from what was taken out? We don't know.
Well, given that you've written that with someone else, was the editing, coming back to the idea that we're talking about today, was the editing process different? Did you edit each other's chapters, or did you?
No,
Was it
I did the same
different?
thing. No, I did exactly the same thing. I did progressive editing for a while, and then I let it sit, and I came back and I edited it again. And then after that, I decided that, okay, that's it. That's all I can do. I sent it off to a professional editor. And it came back with, of course, more modifications. And it's always wonderful to have a professional editor, because they see it from another point of view. They see it from how it could sell, how it's they look at it from different angles. Then when it came back to me, I accepted some of the edits. I didn't accept some of the edits, and that's as well something extremely important. When you send your book to a professional editor, it doesn't mean, first of all, you have to have a strong heart, because what comes back might be very difficult to hear, or what comes back might be wonderful to hear. But at the same time, you are giving someone permission to give you opinion. So you must be open to that opinion, and don't take anything personally, because it's a professional opinion. Yeah. And so what I do is I take some in and I don't take some in. It doesn't matter, because ultimately it's your decision and it's your book. And once that's done, I actually then got a beta reader and got him to give me an opinion. But editing it's an extremely important step, and I think that writers who do not go through the editing process will find that maybe years down the line, when they have become more experienced as a writer, they're going to read the earlier work and go, "Oh, did I write that?" Yeah, they'll cringe, because they didn't realize that it hasn't. Not editing a book is almost as if you are just stepping out. Everybody edits, even fashion designers. They would first have people look at it before anything goes out. You need to review it. It's the
thing that's fascinating about this, and I specifically want to talk about professional editors here in the context of self-publishing. One of the criticisms that is often leveled at self-publishing often is that there is too much unstructured, unedited work that's without consideration. And of course, when you can self-publish and when you can do what you want, whenever you want, with whoever you want, you can be forgiven for doing things a little bit too early. But my gut feeling, and I would absolutely wholeheartedly suggest this, is that the editing process is something that you have to factor into your budget.
Yes.
If you're going to put in a book, if you're going to put out you have to factor in that someone else has got to read it before you put it out. If you're going down the self-publishing route. If you're going down the publishing route, well, you just won't get a publishing deal if the book is rubbish. I mean, you just won't. So you want to save yourself that embarrassment. I would imagine, I don't know this for sure, but I would imagine maybe it's a 3 strikes and you're out system with publishing. If you get a book from someone and it's awful, you might get one chance. If the second book's also awful, they just won't read the third one, will they?
No. Well, publishers are extremely picky. So whatever you want to give to a publisher, it has to be already more or less 90% or even 95% perfect.
Finished, yeah.
Yes, finished. Because don't forget that if a big 5 publisher, let's say Random House, decides to take your book, they will still edit it no matter what happens, because they will still have the book go through their own editors before they will. Oh yes. So so people will go, oh, but I don't have to edit because, if it gets accepted, it'll edit. But that's the thing. You need to give them a product that they salivate. They go, oh, wow, it's so beautifully written. It's amazing. Because that they go through another editing process, it doesn't matter. But you need to get your foot in. Because if you're not in, they won't even consider. So imagine if you turn in a piece of work that hasn't been edited and it's full of flaws and full of mistakes, they're not even going to read it.
Well, they just won't. I mean, they're not even going to suggest it. And I wouldn't imagine, because they're too busy, they won't even give you a second chance because they probably feel offended.
Well, let me look at myself, right? I am a very detailed person. I'm highly detailed. So which means that if I read a book and there is a grammatical mistake, I'll pick it out straight away. And if there's too many, I won't read the book because it's annoying. Because I cannot sink into the story when my mind is going, wait a minute, that's a spelling mistake here and there's a grammatical mistake here. I don't understand this plot. Where the heck does this person go? And then I can't immerse myself into the story. You can't buy into it.
You can't invest.
Yeah. So imagine if they're publishers like me, so they won't even read the book.
Yeah, I totally agree. One of the things that I'm really fascinated to talk about with you, given that you write fiction, have you considered that maybe your book could be a movie or a series on Netflix?
Gosh.
Have you considered that?
Yes. Do you know how I write? I actually write it in Technicolor. When I'm writing a book, I see it in the screen. I see it. I even have okay, this is another thing that I do. I literally pick out movie stars at that
yes, you pick who you want to have in the movie.
Yeah, and have as my character, and I actually literally print out their photograph in my notes, and so that when I'm describing the character in my book, I'm looking at the picture going, okay, he's got brown hairs or she's got brown hair and she's got like sunken cheeks, and I'm literally describing this person. So it makes it very real. And I used to teach, I still teach creative writing. And I always say that when you're writing, make sure you have a note right next to you, because the notes, it's so important. The book is going to be, let's say, 300 pages. You need to remember details of it, because if nobody will, you need to have, as an author, you need to know your book inside and out. So what I do, as soon as I create a new character, in my notes, I would write down the new character's name. I would even go as far as giving them a birthday. Seriously, I'm this.
Yes, this is genius.
I am very, very, terribly detailed. And I would literally describe them like, this character is annoying. She likes details. She hates coffee, and she's a vegan. And I would describe her to the T, so that when I'm writing the book, I remember who she is. Because sometimes you forget what you said about her, and you go, what did I say about her? But you're not going to go back 500 or 300 pages to find out what you wrote about her. So
it's so relevant if you think about something like the Queen's Gambit, which we've just finished watching. We invested so much in that character. It's all about chess. It's about her going to Russia. It's about her playing this game that some people know about and some people don't. And we're not talking about the game. We're talking about this girl who grew up in an orphanage, and what does she eat, and what does she drink, and how does she relax, and how does she deal with the stress? And so we're creating this sort of almost ecosystem for her. This, like you are in 48. What will the earth look like, and what will that coffee drinking vegan who loves to bake bread look like, and what color is her hair, and what music does she like? Because what that does is it creates more atmosphere. And I'm specifically interested in this for you because Netflix is a thing, and they're always looking for scripts. They're always looking for books to make shows about.
If Netflix is watching this right now, take my book.
It's a great idea. It's such a great idea.
Because when I wrote Late Dawn, I mean, literally, I see it in Technicolor. And even the people who are editing were telling me, it's like, Michelle, this sounds like a movie. I said, yes, I wrote it as a movie.
Well, that's what it is. It is. It does sound like a movie. And that's even more importantly why the editing has to be spot on, doesn't it?
Yes.
Because as you said, it's not spelling mistakes and grammar. It's also the flow.
It's plot. Yeah, it's plot.
Yeah, it's plot.
It's characters. They have to fall in love or or even if they hate the character, it's fantastic, because that means that you've written something right for them to hate the character so much. Because you know what, villains are as interesting as heroes. And if you realize more and more, Netflix are all about the incredible villain. You know, you hate this villain so much, it kind of, you want to vomit. And
you have a reaction to them, don't you?
Yes,
you have a reaction.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. That means that they've done something right. So editing is all about making sure that whatever you're writing sticks together. So this is why I always say you need to, hi Joey, you need to have a notes while you're writing, so that you note everything down. In my second novel, which is not published yet, please, if there's a publisher out there, take the book. I have so many names because it's a Chinese world, right? So which means that which means that the stories are a little, the names are a little bit more complicated sorry, if you're hearing a lot of noise, there's a construction site right behind my house, so they're starting now. And so I need to write every single name down so that I myself don't get confused of who I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, look, let me pick up on Joey. Joey is quite an active member of our group. This particular concept is all about the group. So hi, Joey. We're talking today about, first of all, because she's just arrived, I'll just recap. The first thing is, when do you start the editing process yourself? And Michelle had two ideas for that. One is the idea of a progressive edit, chapter by chapter, so to speak, and also the idea of an edit at the end of the book to read the whole thing. And then the bigger question is, well, when do you then hand that over to a professional editor to really pull it apart, to have, and as you said, and this is really the key phrase probably of the whole show, you've got to have the courage, the heart to say, you know what, your opinion is valid and I will listen to it. I don't have to agree with it and I don't have to do everything that you say, but I'm open to your ideas. And I want Joey to pick up on this idea, because I know she's a writer and she's got some processes going. But you know, that idea of having the wisdom, what's the word? The humility. That's a good word to say. You know what? I trust your opinion. I wouldn't have picked that up, and I'm not sure I agree with you. But how do you do it? How do you accept that graciously?
Oh, sorry about that. Even I can hear the
yeah, that's okay. No worries. We can.
Okay.
It's all part of the live experience.
Right, because there's a huge construction behind my house. So it's the first time it can be devastating, because the first time I remembered when I was writing Late Dawn, and I have this the opinions. Oh dear Lord, they are really going at it. Tell me if you can't hear me. The first time when I had an editor tell me things, and you know, it felt so personal. It felt like, oh, you're criticizing my baby. You're saying that my baby is ugly. But at the end of the day, what happens is that I was told by another person, because look, Michelle, you ultimately can accept or deny whatever comments that come your way, but don't forget, an editor is there to make sure the book is the best it can be. That's what you pay them for. So you need to be open to all the comments. It doesn't mean that you have to accept it, but listen to them, and it's very valuable. And so that's what I did in the end. You know, I just literally put aside my pride, put aside everything, and humbly accept everything that they say.
It's a strong test of character in a way, isn't it?
It is. It is. But at the same time,
there's a comment here from Joey. Let's pick up on that. Chapter by chapter made me get bogged down in the process, but this is a good idea. I wish I'd known about using a professional editor. And it's okay. You are fine. I cannot hear the construction. Okay, so let me pick up on this idea that, you know, the reason why this group exists, and I'm so glad you've made that comment, Joey. The reason this group exists, and the reason I'm so proud to be part of it, is that we know for sure that there are plenty of people that have gone through this process on their own without this resource at their disposal. Without a guy in Melbourne, Australia, interviewing a person in Singapore and being watched by someone in Connecticut and Trinidad, and the collective wisdom that we're sharing here with Joey and Linda and Kathian is that we're all learning from each other. And I know this because I'm a creator too. The creative journey can be very, very lonely because you think, I've got an idea and I'm just going to run with it. And I'm really proud of what Joey said there, that chapter by chapter can be a little bit daunting.
Yes.
But the idea of a professional editor really is, it separates the wheat from the chaff, doesn't it? It really does separate. It really is the essence of what a book can become, isn't it?
Yep, it is. And Joey also, yes, I do get bogged down as well from progressive editing, but don't get bogged down in the sense where you just get stuck with it. So what I do, like for instance, if I write one chapter, right, I would write it to the end, and then I would read it maybe once over and pick up things that I want to change. And once I'm done with that, I move on. So don't get bogged down in that sense.
Okay,
yeah, one edit. Don't keep editing the same chapter. So just read it. You're happy with it, or you're not happy with it. You're not too sure about it. Move on, next chapter. And because what happened is that, let's say if you've written about 10 chapters and now you want to read from chapter 1 to chapter 10 again, you might actually re-edit the whole thing again. Well, not re-edit, but you might make certain little bits of changes there.
Yeah.
But that's okay, because what's important is that you need to keep going. So don't get stuck in one chapter. Right now, I'm writing another book. And I'm getting stuck. I'm literally having a writer's block. But I think it's only because my mind is on so many things. I'm wishing that my second book gets published. I'm hoping that that this pandemic will end. There's just so many things happening at the same time. So I'm getting writer's block because my mind is not focused. But having said that, I still try to not get bogged down by the chapter edits, by the progressive edits. So once I do this, I literally take it away and I write chapter by chapter. I don't do it in a manuscript. Some people do that. They write and then they go. I don't. I literally write chapter, I close it, and the next chapter, I close it, and the next chapter, I close it, and I go.
Let me pick up on this, and thanks, Joey, for that comment. Editing give yourself one edit per chapter and then move on. That's a great little hack.
Yeah.
Because we all have, and I have this problem too, we all have this problem of over editing, being so overcritical.
Yep.
But one edit and move on.
Yep.
But look, I really want to pick up on the idea of, do you do edits progressively, and do you write the story in sequence, or do you sometimes work creatively and say, look, I might write the ending today, because I know that's how Woody Allen works. He works based on his flow. Can we talk about flow? Do you write progressively?
I write progressively, but I do have an ending in mind. So for every book that I have, I kind of know how I want it to end. And what I do is the same thing. I have a notes book. So not like Woody Allen, who writes the ending. Oh, that's good, Joey. What I do is that in the notes, I write the ending. I don't write it in a chapter. I write the ending in the notes so that I can see where I'm going to. It's almost like a
very good. You've got the end in mind.
Yeah, it's like a roadmap. I know where I'm going. I just need to fill the space between where I am and where I'm going. And what happens is that some people, they'll tell you, oh, you plot. You kind of have a plot of each chapter. I don't do that, because what happens is that I find it's easier for me to write organically. I just write. It's like streaming, streaming my thoughts on paper.
No,
I just write.
I actually want to pick up on this. I was going to ask, do you think, I don't know this answer, but do you think that writing with an end in mind is a common theme, or do you just write it out and see where it takes you?
I write with an end in mind, but my ending might change. For Late Dawn, I had an ending in mind. It was so clear. And then when I got to it, the ending was completely different to what I thought.
Okay.
It's literally not even what I wrote. And it was fantastic. I'm like, this is a much better ending. But I had to get to the ending to actually write the ending, which is really bizarre.
Yeah.
But the good thing is that the process of going to the ending, I already had that roadmap.
Let's pick up on this. Katiana's got the same problem. I want to write a book, but I'm editing it to death. I get so frustrated.
Oh,
so it's a common theme. It's a common theme here that we just over edit.
Yes. Well, for Katya, right? I think Katiana, is it Katiana? Katya.
Katyan.
Katyan. for me is if the book is already completed and you have already edited it to death, give it to a professional editor. It's time.
There it is.
It's
when
time.
you feel that you've edited it to death and you can't do anything more with it, that's
Give
the
it to-
trigger.
Yeah, that's
to
the
give
trigger.
it to a professional editor.
Yeah. But make sure the manuscript is finished though. But if you're just editing one chapter to death, then move on.
Move on. Okay, so Joey's really interested in this one. She goes, I do not write with an end in mind. I just wanted to get my thoughts out of my head. So that, I think this stream of consciousness idea can be quite a common theme, don't you think?
Yeah. For some people, they just write. Like for me, I write. I do have, and even the chapters, I would have an idea of how I want my chapter to go. And then in the end, when I'm writing, another idea would pop in and suddenly the chapter is different. And that happens. And that happens when you're literally in the zone and writing, because ideas will pop in and the plot will change. So there was a lot of, in my book, I think there was one plot change that came because I was writing, and suddenly it just made sense. I'm like, oh, that is much better than what I thought. And so I didn't even write what I planned in the beginning.
Let's pick up on this question, the question of cost.
Yeah.
Joey is on a budget, and she says, you know what, I don't know if I can afford a professional editor, but my gut feeling is the book would have been better if I had one. What's your advice around the idea of the cost of an editor versus the quality that you get as a result?
Sadly, it is expensive to get an editor. And I know this for a fact because I literally budget for an editor.
You budget for an editor?
I do. I see it as part of my marketing cost. I don't know where to put it, but I see it as a way of making my book better. So it's a marketing thing, right? But I do budget for it, and there is no other way to do this. It is expensive. There are some editors that are cheaper. So maybe if you go on, the one that I use is Ritzy.com. Where do I do?
I'll just
okay.
Up on Joey's comments there. I know that the reason why we've started this particular group, just lost my head. The reason why we've started this particular group is that Joyce and Sherilyn are both editors. And unfortunately, Joyce and Sherilyn are in Thanksgiving sort of mode and traveling to family events and can't come today. But we might do a special show and a special section for them because Joyce specializes in editing. Like, that's her skill. And I'm really proud and really excited to hear you say that you factor in editing into the budget, because there's only so many things you can do on your own.
Yeah.
And budget editing is like anything, like bread, like cars, like eating out, like traveling. There's various costs for various destinations, for various product services. And it can be an expensive process, but I'm guessing you get what you pay for.
Yeah, you do. Because remember what I said? If you want to present your work to a publisher, they want to be able to read your book and go, whoa, that's amazing. But if you present to them a work that is flawed, they're not going to read the work, even though you might be having the best idea ever. So how do you find a good editor? I think that's a good question. I go on Ritzy. I think I type in Ritzy.com. Ritzy.com is a place that I look for my editors. And you have a huge gamut of choice. You've got and you don't even have to accept them. You just send in your work and find out who wants to edit your work, and look at the pricing, because they'll tell you how much it costs. They'll tell you, I'll charge you this one, and then you can accept, or you don't have to accept. So you can, in that already is a first step. You can look at how much each person is
and that's
willing.
What you were doing there, Reedsy.com?
Yeah, that's what I do. I go to this website and I look for editors. Now, how I find a good editor is I look for the editor who is familiar with my genre. So if you are writing nonfiction, don't look for an editor who is a fiction writer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because otherwise they won't get, for them, they'll kind of edit, but they're not passionate about your work. So you need to get, I'm a science fiction, so I normally make sure that the editor I'm choosing also edits science fiction or fantasy or speculative fiction, because those are the ones who read those kinds of books and they edit before. And you can see a list of all the books that they've edited, and you might connect with one. You go, oh, I like that book. So if they have edited that book, then I would want them to edit my book as well. So
Can we chat about what's the reasonable amount of money for cost for editing? It's a point of view that's really touched a few nerves here. We first of all know that we need to edit, but we're worried about the cost. What do you think's a reasonable budget of editing a book? Do you base it on how big the book is? Do you allow per month?
Yeah, no. Some editors, they charge per word, believe it or not.
They charge per word. Okay.
And some editors charge per block of words, like 10,000 words, and this is how much I charge. So there are no fixed rules on charges. Each editor charges. I had an editor once who charged 3 cents US per word.
3 cents a word.
Yeah, but if you think about the number of words that I write, my novels are normally about 95,000 to 100,000 words.
100,000 words at 3 cents. What is that? That's what's like that, $3,000?
No, about $2,000.
3 cents per thousand. That's $3,000, isn't it?
Oh, $3,000. Yeah. It could be $3,000. Yeah. So
$3,000 for 1,000 words, 100,000 words.
But you don't have to accept those kinds of editors. See, there are also other editors that are cheaper. So it really depends on you at the end of the day. Yeah, I know, right? Yes. Having said that, that is not the only kind of editors. I mean, there are other editors who would charge less. So you just have to look, and you have to connect with them as well. In all honesty, I'm planning to be an editor myself.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
because what we've chatted about today, especially in regards to the professional editing, is that it is such an important part that it's not an option, is it? It's not optional. If you're going to get a book out, you've got to edit it. Yeah.
Yes, you do. You do. Believe me, because imagine, right? You're a tiny little dot in a huge ocean. You want to stand out, and how do you stand out? Your book has got to be word perfect. I mean, it's got to be wow. Not just the story, but also the way you write. What's the name? The Road by McCormick. Seriously, it's 70,000. I think it's about 70,000 words. It's actually it's not a very thick book, and if you read it, it's I don't know yet that one. If you read the book, it's the writing it's not difficult. It's not literary, but it's a very interesting style. So I have a feeling that also went through certain editing to get it to that tone of voice.
Tone. Yeah, even tone is an editing style, isn't it? Tone.
Yep.
Because as Joey said here, she said her book is all over the place. Let me just talk. My book is all over the map because I did not get it professionally edited. And that's because the stream of consciousness, you're getting it out. That's a style. That's part one. Yeah. You're getting the book out and it's on paper and you've done it. But then you need to go back and look at it more holistically, as you said, for tone, for flow, for plot.
For plot, so important for plot. Because otherwise, if your plot has got holes, whoever who reads it, they will know and they'll go, that doesn't make sense. You know, this book doesn't make sense at all. And you've lost the person.
You know,
never read it again.
There's a particular thing that happens in our life, what I call a poldark moment. This is a particular style of thing that happens to us. My wife will get to about, I don't know, 7 episodes into a series, possibly, and she'll stand up and she'll say, that's not realistic. I'm not watching this anymore. We call it a poldark moment because what happened in Poldark, the show, was about 7 episodes in, one of the characters, which she'd really invested in, did something that she thought was out of context for that character plot, right?
Okay.
And so she couldn't get past that, and she stood up. She actually stood up and left the room, and she goes, I'm not watching this show anymore. The writing is terrible. And she couldn't get past it. And I'm guessing with the book, it's even worse. If you read a book and you go, hang on, you just said this now, but you're talking about this and now you're talking about that. It's a mismatch, isn't it?
Yep. And then you go, no, I'm not really reading it. It's true. It's absolutely true. This is the reason why it's not just about creating a wonderful story. That's the easy part. The easy part is getting your story. The difficult part is making sure it sticks, that it makes sense. Compelling, it sticks, it makes sense, and people go,
it's a page turner.
Gosh, yeah. And also people can connect with it, go, that's exactly what I would have done, or yeah, I understand that. That's happened to me before. And so they go, I like that. Oh, it's nonfiction. Okay. No, it doesn't make any difference. You still, nonfiction, it's still kind of, well, nonfiction is a story in itself, but it still has to, the things still need to flow. Because if whatever you're telling people doesn't flow well, they're not going to read it, because nonfiction books.
Joyce, and it's such a shame that Joyce is traveling at this time. She's traveling for Thanksgiving, which is a big, US holiday at the moment. But she often says to me that non-fiction writers can learn a lot from fiction writers, because fiction writers have to have a set of skills that engage, as you say. You've got to keep the flow going. You've got to keep the plot going. You've got to keep the tone going. And you've got to keep the page turning. And I'd imagine those techniques are very relevant to non-fiction as well, aren't they?
They are. For every book. If the person does not want to turn the page, then you've lost the person. You've lost your audience.
Yeah. And how would you do that? Let me pick up on that comment again. How would you do that in a non-fiction context?
I think for the non-fiction context, you need, in my opinion, I've never written a non-fiction. Let's be very I'm thinking about it, so this is a good thing to say. I would have to plot it out even more, because while a fiction book can be more streamlined, stream flowing in your writing, non-fiction I think needs more plotting, because you really would need to know what you're going to write about. In order, chapter 1, this is about this, so I need to write about this to make sure it sticks and is correct. Chapter 2 is about this, but from chapter 1 to chapter 2, there must be some kind of a connection. Otherwise, people are going to go, there's no connection whatsoever. What am I reading?
It's not chronological, is it? It's got to join.
Yeah. So you do need to plot it out more. I have a friend actually who wrote a non-fiction about getting rich, which is fantastic, and how to get rich before the age of 40. I actually endorsed the book because I'm one of these people who, I didn't say that I got rich before 40, but let's say I retired before 40. So, but he took a long time to plot out his book. He made sure that it made sense. He wrote a little bit of his story. Why did he write this book? How did he get the idea of this? Where was his expertise in writing the book? And I think in nonfiction, that's even more important, because people need to understand that if you're writing something about, if you're advising someone to do something, you need to be the expert. Otherwise, you can't do it.
Let's pick up on Linda's comment. She's talking about it has to flow from chapter to chapter. From memory, Linda, I think you're writing a fiction book. Please confirm that. I think this is the book I'm referring to. Please let me know what your book's about. But the concept of flowing from chapter to chapter applies both to fiction and maybe especially to non-fiction, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And how did your friend do it with the non-fiction book about getting rich? He actually charted it all out before he wrote it. Yeah,
he did, because he's got steps. And that's the thing with steps. It means, what does it mean? It means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It doesn't mean 1, 5, 6, 4. It needs to be really, really progressive. So he did chart it.
I would correct that. This is a very good cross-referencing. Linda is writing fiction. You've done it, Michelle. So Linda says, what about changing characters? I'm doing fiction.
I am doing that right now. So the book that I'm writing right now, I've got 2 different timelines. That's even more interesting. Oh, wow. Yeah. So I'm writing from 2 different timelines and 2 different characters. It's a time travel. It's a time travel book. Yeah. So it's 2 different timelines, 2 different characters. And so what I've done is that the first chapter is about this timeline. And literally the second chapter, I jump to the second timeline. But I make sure that I don't jump back and forth all the time. So sometimes I'll be in this timeline for maybe about 2 or 3 chapters, and I go back to this timeline again. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the timelines to meet at some point, because it is a time travel book. So it needs to come together. It's almost like Jeremy Button, growing old together, meeting somewhere in the middle. So
Benjamin Button.
Benjamin Button, that's right.
Yeah.
So with fiction, the great thing is that you can be highly creative. You can be extremely creative. You can write. You can create a new style. As long as the book makes sense, as long as people don't get lost and go, wait a minute, this is too much jumping. I have a headache now. So this is the reason why editing is so important. When I finish this book, I will have to read it again to make sure if I, as a reader, gets annoyed by it.
Well, let me pick up on two movies that obviously could be books. The movie Midnight in Paris, maybe one of my favorite movies of all time.
Oh, really? Okay.
Because, the Owen Wilson character lives in 2020 and with his wife, and they go to Paris, but he then finds himself in 19th century Paris and he's digging it. But that's a mind spin, because then he's got to go back to 21st century Paris and hang out with his wife again at the pool. So you've got, as you said, two timelines. And then they make it even more complex, because those characters that he meets in the 19th century then go to the 18th century. And that it's like 3 levels in. So particular movie, have you seen that movie, Midnight in Paris?
No, I haven't. I haven't seen it. I will have to see it now.
It's a Woody Allen movie.
Okay.
It's very Woody Allen, but the point is that the Owen Wilson character, who's a writer in LA, goes to Paris for a convention, and he lives with quite a materialistic sort of non-creative person who likes things, and he writes for Hollywood, and he's very unhappy. But he happens to hang out with, he just runs into people in the 19th century, Picasso and Hemingway. And he digs it, 20th century, early 20th century. And then he goes back another 100 years. And talking about this flow of time travel, imagine how hard that would be to edit. Because each particular time block has to make sense to you to get in. The exact opposite of that. And I still
this is the reason why it's very important when, as Linda says, when you have different characters, make sure you don't jump at each chapter, because it makes your mind too confused. Stick with one character for a little bit, maybe two, 3 chapters before you jump to the next character, because otherwise people are going to go, this is too much jumping. I can't. On Netflix, for instance, The Witcher is because I love fantasy, so I watched The Witcher, the series. But the first one was so annoying for me, because it kept jumping between him and the past, and they don't tell you. So I would be watching going, which one
where
is
are you
this?
now?
Where am I now? Am I in the past? Am I in the future? But they kept jumping far too fast, and that.
Did you get that sense with a movie a show called Timeless?
Oh yes. Oh, but Timeless, you see them though. They go into a time machine and then they literally are in the past. So that's not so bad. But
because they set it up. Today we're going to meet Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln, 1854. Get dressed up. We're going in the machine. Yeah. There's a bit of a setup, isn't there?
Yes, exactly. But the whole story happens in the past, so it doesn't jump. Whereas in The Witcher, it kept going back and forth, and I was so annoyed. I thought, no, too much.
What I want to pick up on is in regards to jumping and flow and tone. I've watched Inception 3 times. And it just blows my head apart every time. I mean, I want to get it. But that's an example of too much jumping, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Inception. Yeah. Have you seen Inception?
Yeah.
It's a great movie. It's well done. But the level
confusing.
Of depth, it's confusing.
Very confusing.
And that's a professional movie, worth $100 million. So we have to, when we're editing, we have to take out all that confusion for the reader, because they're not going to stay with us. I'm not Leonardo DiCaprio. I mean, I don't have that attraction that you're going to watch the movie anyway because he's in it. Yeah. You can't. You're starting from especially as a new writer, you're starting from a standing start. So you're picking up on some really, really, really cool ideas. Thank you, Joey. I love that show too. One of my favourite shows, Timeless. The basic concept was that someone makes a time machine and they go back, but there's a second time machine to to go back and chase the first one because someone stole it.
Well,
and that picks up on your time travel book, yeah?
Yeah. Well, even in Late Dawn, in this novel here, I have some time changes. But what I do to not confuse the person, I actually literally put the year and the date before the chapter.
Oh,
so
really?
people know, oh, okay, so we're talking about this now, and then the story unfolds like 2 or 3 chapters, and then later on I go back to the present.
Let me just pick up on that comment.
Yeah.
This is one problem I had as well. I read a book just before self-publishing it, but I also didn't like my voice. It made sense to me, but I wondered whether it made sense to other readers. So again, it picks up on this idea of you need a second set of eyeballs, a second set of parameters. Yep. I've really enjoyed this chat, and I really am a little disappointed that Joyce couldn't make it. We'll have to pick up on this again because Joyce does the editing part. Just to be very clear on what we do in our group, I do the marketing piece. I'm the guy that's trying all these sites saying, have you considered having a podcast or have you considered having a live stream? Because you hadn't heard of this site before and now you might start using it.
Yeah.
And that's my job in the group. My job is to find all this really great tech because I'd imagine you would know this specifically. Once you've written a book, then it's there. Then what?
Yeah.
How are you going to promote it? How are you going to get more people to buy it? It's pretty hard, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's not my forte. Oh, I wish I have a magical wand and create a marketing person for myself.
Yeah. Well, look, while I'm just running through the graphics, can you type your website into the chat, and I'll put that into the group for people. It looks like we've got a very, very, very good big hello to Bruno, my mate Bruno.
Hey.
Mulholland Drive still confuses me. So here's another timeline. This is a mate of mine living in Vancouver, Canada. Yeah. So
there are films like that are told backwards, and I think that's just Hollywood trying to be very creative.
Yeah. So a big hello to Linda, a big hello to
Linda.
Bruno, a big hello to Joey, big hello to Katia, my friend in Trinidad, big hello to Linda calling in from Connecticut who wishes she was in Singapore, and a big hello to everyone now listening on Facebook and YouTube. This is really the new world that we're living in. This is not dystopian. I'm quite digging this. This is almost utopian. I live in Melbourne, Australia. I can walk to the beach in 10 minutes, but here I am talking to a person in Singapore.
I wish I was in Melbourne now.
We've had 3 days in a row, absolute zero. Tomorrow we crack 28 days at 0 cases.
Wow. Okay, now I really wish I'm in Melbourne.
We did the hard yards. We wore a mask for 100 days and we did all the hard things.
Oh, we still wear a mask here.
Yeah, we just this week we've been allowed not to wear our masks. So we did the hard work. But what this group is for me, and let me decode on that. This group is write my book, but what we do here is it's called Wisdom Wednesdays. I said to Michelle, this is a little bit like running a racing car. So Wisdom Wednesdays is Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. in Singapore, 11 a.m. in Melbourne. It's 4 p.m. in Vancouver.
Oh, wow.
I'm not exactly sure what time that is in Trinidad. I think that's a very similar timing to Eastern. But let me pick up on this idea of what you're doing with the book. You've got a physical book. It's called Late Dawn. It's a dystopian sort of fiction fantasy book set in 4848. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
And it's a book about what could happen if we don't play the game and do the right thing and look after each other.
Yeah.
So and it's available as a book and also on Kindle, and that's a pretty cool thing. I'm just going to type in the comments section there what your website is while we're chatting, so that it gives people a chance to
connect with me. You can ask me questions.
There is the website, michelletanmeezy.com.
Yep.
And you've written 2 books, and you've got a 3rd one on the way.
Yes, hopefully, if there are any editors out there, there's an editor in Australia actually interested, but it takes a while for a publisher, but it just takes a while for the publisher to confirm. So I'm hoping.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that Melbourne will lead by example to say we've done the hard work. I know it's hard. 100 days with a mask on and not being able to leave the house. It sounds almost like a prison sentence, but the point is that we came out the other side and we now have 0 cases 28 days in a row. It's worth it.
And Singapore, we are still wearing masks. It's been a year.
Yeah.
A year.
A year. Wow.
A year. We have to wear a mask everywhere we go. We have to trace. We have to put an app in, and so the government can trace us. Yeah. And Singapore is relatively safe now, I hope.
Yeah, well, and the thing that I find interesting is that just the global community here, and a big shout out to Bruno about this because we talk about this a lot. I live in Melbourne. I love the beach. I can walk there in 10 minutes. I'll probably go there tonight. But, in my daytime, I can chat to anyone in the world at any time. And during the lockdown process, this is incredibly important. I've got mates of mine that can't leave the house or don't want to because they're too scared. But we can still chat. And StreamYard is that process for me. Wisdom Wednesdays and also another program I'm doing called Marketing Mondays. So we've chatted for well over the hour. We've had a lot of comments. A big thank you to everyone. I'm just going to put that website up again for you, michelletanmezy.com. Next week, I'm very proud of this. Next week, we have a really amazing show. Last week's show has had 28,000 impressions on Twitter and 27,000 views.
Wow.
And I'm going to play a little snippet of that in a minute to end the show. But next week, we actually have a sequel of that. Because we had 6 guests on at one time. With StreamYard can actually have 10.
Wow.
So I'm going to try something I've never done before, and that is I'm going to run the show for 2 hours. And every 15 minutes in that time period, there's a different guest.
Oh, wow. That's
like
excellent.
Musical guests. And so it's going to be hard. As I said, it's like running a racing car. But every 15 minutes is going to be a different person. And they're going to talk about what 2020 is meant to them. Right? Because it's been a big year for everyone in the world. And it's also, more importantly than that, a bit of a reset for what 2021 could be like wherever you are in the world. We are at 0. You can be too if you want to do the work, if your government allows that process. We can do it. 2021 can be better than 2021. And so I'm going to talk to 8 of my mates about that every 15 minutes for 2 hours. Please join us because I've got a lot of really cool patent interrupts to try. And the next patent interrupt, just to talk about what StreamYard can do, I'm rambling here a bit because I'm driving the racing car, is that I'm going to put on a clip from last week because this show was so powerful. It's about the idea that in this environment where you can't leave the house and you have to wear a mask, can we do some of this with an online event? I'm going to do more of this. I'm going to really focus on this point because it's very important to me. So thank you very much, Michelle, for calling in. I'm really thankful.
Thank you for inviting me.
And lots of great comments. So let's wrap it up there. You go and enjoy your day and go and have a chat to those construction people and tell them to calm it down.
I know. Oh, good heavens. Yeah. It's going to be like this for 2 years. I know.
Go and have some breakfast there. I'll go and have some lunch. So a big thank you to everyone. And we're going to end with a really lovely snip.
And happy Thanksgiving to America.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving. We'll see you later.
All right. Bye.
Okay, so now I'm going to play a little clip from last week. And I really, really do appreciate all of the great comments and all of the great community that we're building here on YouTube, on Twitter, on Periscope, and on Facebook. We'll see you next week. What are your thoughts on the idea of where virtual events and live streaming might go next year?
Well, I think we've really seen a push, and I think it's sort of because of we kind of got that push from COVID and that sort of thing. But I actually wrote an article last night on, the future event, and I compared it to, I don't know if you remember, but what was it, about 30, 40 years ago, there's that Maxell tape cassette guy who sits in that deep chair and he turns on the sound and the sound from this tape player just kind of blows back his hair. The point is that to me, that was one of the first sort of it wasn't, it was pseudo digital. Let's get that straight. But it was one of those experiences that we were able to take out from what we were seeing and what we were feeling. And now, 40 years later, we kind of have to go, well, we need to elevate that whole experience of what we're doing. And to me, a lot of businesses are really typically missing that point. They're not able to create those, as I call it, a remarkable event, a remarkable experience worth remembering. So it's super important that we create these keys and we have all these pieces in place that allow us to do that. We don't want Zoom fatigue. We don't want, just a plain old simple webcam. We want something more extravagant. We want a festival, right? We want something that actually entertains and informs us at the same time simultaneously.